All right. Hello, lovelies, and welcome here, Stephanie and Swail. I am so excited to have such a powerhouse woman in business on my first ever episode. The reason that I actually asked you to be a part of this journey with me, and by the way, you were the only one I asked to be the first guest on my podcast, was because I just really see you living in your integrity, leading your business like a powerhouse woman who speaks her truth, speaks her mind, and lives from her heart. I remember, what was it, about 9 months or so ago, you popped up in my DMs. And I don't actually remember what you said, but I remember how I felt. And that
Mm.
actually kind of rippled into me showing other women of like, this is how DMs are done. This is how it's supposed to
Yeah.
go. This is how you build authentic connections with other people in
Mhm.
business. And as anyone who is on Instagram who has a business knows, you get DMs all the time
Oh yeah.
and they're not usually as welcoming and as encouraging as yours was. And I just remember it naturally evolving into a very supportive, like girl power energy between us. And it's kind of evolved and grown since then. And so I just want to thank you for coming into my world and thank you for being here today.
You're so welcome. And I just quickly want to say that when I messaged somebody on Instagram, when I messaged you, it was also because I felt you you were kind of a reflection of me being a woman of integrity,
Mm,
authentic. So are you, so it just felt like natural. Like this is such a cool person who's doing really cool things. And I just was immediately drawn to you, and I think that Instagram for me is such, I mean, that's our main platform really. And so it's such a cool place to be able to build relationships and like, look where it's led us,
yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
yeah, exactly. And I think you said it too, like we're very relational forward people, and that can be challenging on such a curated platform. So when people are genuine, you feel it. And so like attracts like, and I'm glad you popped into my world. And here we are.
Here we are. The rest is history.
Yeah. So I do want to get into your story a bit because I think it's fascinating, but I would want to start with your definition of sovereignty because we're here on Sovereign Heart, and I want to hear
Mhm.
how, in your terms, what would you define that word as?
How would I define sovereignty for me? To me, sovereignty comes down to the freedom to choose
Mm,
and the freedom to choose and also the freedom to live in alignment with your truth. And to me, sovereign is to move into this world honoring your authentic self and honoring what feels true to you and making decisions out of this place of deep, true alignment.
yeah.
And that when each sovereign being owns and honors their own sovereignty, it creates a space for us all to do the same,
Yeah.
and we as an individual also represent the collective. And so sovereignty is like, what a powerful word, and what a word that I try to abide by. And the sovereignty to just choose what feels right from this place of authenticity, from this place of not choosing it because we're going to fit in or to appease other people,
Mm-hmm.
but our true, what I call like our essential self, our soul self, right? And really making decisions from this place of of pure freedom.
Yeah, I see you live that so clearly in your messaging, in
Mhm.
just the way that you show up in your stories, and the way that you provoke women to also step into that too is very clear because it's also like women stepping into that place of leadership is such,
Yeah.
it's not a new thing, but it is a different approach than we're used to seeing, and it challenges women to step
Mhm.
up into again, that sense of sovereignty, self-responsibility, authenticity,
Yes.
integrity, alignment, which are big words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we hear these words a lot: sovereignty, alignment, authenticity. And then it comes down to like, what does that actually mean? And I mean, for each individual, it means different things. But you brought up a really good point, which is self responsibility,
Yeah.
right? And it's being really responsible for you and your being and taking care of yourself, right? And you have the responsibility to make decisions which are or are not in alignment with your truth. right?
Exactly.
And leading from that place is really powerful because we also inspire others to lead their life from that place as well.
Which is a perfect segue into, I think, your origin story, because I would imagine figuring out what Steph's truth is was probably not always easy, but you took
Mhm.
some pretty big, courageous, bold moves to get you to where you are today. I would love to hear where it started for you, and you can go as far back as you want. It's up to you, but just knowing bits and pieces, I would love to hear the full story of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, it's a journey. So I'll start from like the really big pieces that I talk about. And one of the main pieces was when I was, and I'll never get this, being diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 12.
Mm,
And I really struggled in school. I struggled to sit still. I struggled to follow rules. I was always pulled up to the front of the class because I was always trying to talk to people, make friends, make connections. It's just been a part of me. And I grew up in a family where you go to university, you get you get your degree, you get your master's, and then you pursue a job in the corporate world. You know, that's kind of what I believe was, I felt as if that was kind of expected of me to do. And so, going through high school, university is quite hard. University, I did well because I chose psychology, and psychology for me was like, I was naturally in love with psychology. It was the only thing I wanted to study in university. I'm like, couldn't care less about business, couldn't care less about science, couldn't care less about anything else other than psychology. And I began my journey of psychology in university. Then I graduated, and then I had a decision of if I wanted to pursue being a therapist. And at the time, I was working with a therapist, and I decided that I wanted to try something different. I just felt like I wasn't getting, I was also going through a bit of a spiritual awakening. And I
mm,
felt like that part of me wasn't really being honored in psychology. And the topics that we would talk about with my therapist just weren't, I don't know. I'm like, there's more to this. So I ended up seeking out a life coach, and I started working with this life coach who was like incredible. And she's had, one of the most impacting presences, and yeah, she's probably one of the most impactful people in my life. And
wow.
I started working with her one-on-one. And after we started working together, I was like, I don't want to be a therapist. I don't want to pursue this. I want to go into life coaching. And she had a training, and I ended up doing her year-long training. And after I finished, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I want to do this. I think I was about 23 or 24 by the time I had finished. I started leading women's group and women's circles, and I loved it. There was just something about bringing people together.
Yeah.
Then I started seeing people one-on-one, and clients that were much older than I was at the time. And I had this story that nobody was going to take me seriously because I was young,
Mm,
and I felt like I had lived a pretty comfortable, sheltered life growing up in Calgary, Canada, originally from Winnipeg. And it was nice and awesome, but I felt like I lacked experience. I felt like I didn't really fully know who I was, what I was capable of, because I was always, I don't know, it's almost like the path was always clearly laid out for me.
yeah.
And I had this moment of, I want to go and see the world, like just step out of my comfort zone. I want to live a little bit. Actually, I want to live a lot. And I
Mm.
ended up booking a one-way ticket to Peru, and I booked a one-way ticket to Lima, and no return flight. Everyone was like, you're nuts. You're going
Wow.
to be back in a couple months.
Yeah.
I didn't go with barely any money in my bank account. I was like, I'll figure it out. And I was just so brave, so courageous, zero plan, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, if that, in my bank account. No plan whatsoever. I get to Lima, and I'm like, okay, I need a job. I need to figure out how to like sustain myself because I'm not going back to Canada. I'm going to figure this out on my own. I ended up like getting a job teaching English for this English institute, and I started paying my way and being able to sustain myself. All the while, I was going to the Sacred Valley. I was meeting with healers and shamans and really working on my own journey. And I really believe that we can only help people as far as the depths into which we know ourselves. And
Yeah.
although I had known myself and my conditioning from a very psychological perspective, when it comes into my spiritual journey and really uncovering deeper layers of myself, I hadn't fully experienced that. And so I worked a lot with different healers in the Sacred Valley out of Cusco, which is near Machu Picchu.
Mm.
And it just blew my mind to like how how this healing journey is just so nuanced and there's so many different pieces and layers to it. And I came back to Lima and I decided one thing that I needed and I knew was lacking was a community for women. And at the time I've done my life coaching. I was also a yoga teacher, personal trainer. I've done so many things in my life. And I was like, you know what? I don't feel 100% comfortable to like coach with people right now. I didn't speak fluent Spanish.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? There's a need to bring women together, maybe to do meditation, yoga, and workouts. So I created this group called Tribe. And Tribe was a community for women who were expats who wanted to come together once a week. We did yoga, we meditated, we worked out, and we would go for dinners. And it became this huge deal where like the embassies knew about Tribe and they would refer their employees to join.
Wow.
And yeah, it was so cool because I had brought women who were expats in Lima, which Lima is a city of 13 million people. There were so many expats, tons of expats. And the one thing that I kept hearing was like, I want to, find like-minded women. And I didn't know how to do that. So I created that group. And that group is kind of the foundation for what exists today, a soul study. And we still have women who are a part of Tribe, the original group in Peru, who are members of Soul Study. And
Cool.
it's really, really cool. And so then I started Tribe. That lasted for about 3-4 years. And then I decided I was done with Lima. It's a really interesting city to live in. I moved to Rio. I met my now partner. And then the pandemic happened in 2020. And I was at this place where I wanted to dive back into coaching, but I am all about building a freedom-based life, right? Like I live in Brazil. I'm Canadian. I love to travel. And I didn't even know online coaching was a thing. And in
Hmm.
2020, obviously, everything goes online. And that is when Soul Study was born. That is when my coaching business started. And 2020 was probably, for me personally, one of the most pivotal, important, best year of my life, because that is when the path was clearly laid out for me of my own path of what I'm here to do and what I'm here to create. And, fast forward to now, 4 years later, Soul City has evolved to this global membership community where it's really helps women on a holistic personal growth journey of mind, body, and soul. And it started with, I think there were 12 women that showed up to the first call. I was the only facilitator. We would meet every week. And now we have a team of facilitators. And it's just evolved. And it was really crazy because the reason why it came through to me was I was just like praying, what am I supposed to do? It's 2020. I want to go back into coaching. I want to start, something. I want to bring women together. And then this whole idea came to me. And I sent out I think I posted on my Instagram. We didn't even have a Soul Study Instagram account. We didn't have a Facebook, anything. And it was actually called Soul Study Sundays because it was happening every Sunday.
Cool.
And then the whole idea emerged, and here we are 4 years later, and my whole business has developed, and since then I've gone on to be a business mentor for women. I started off as a life and relationship coach, and now I'm here to help women build and scale their soul-led business. And that's a really short snippet of the journey because there's been a whole lot of shit hits the fan moments of like so many moments of like rock bottom, build yourself back up, rock bottom, build yourself back up, and so many curveballs that life has thrown me, but all to say it's really made me into this leader that believes in her work, that is here to help my clients build the business of their dreams, here to help the women inside of Soul Study, here to create massive impact and to help other women do the same. And my whole thing was, my story growing up was nobody took me seriously. Why? Because the world in which we grew up in which I grew up in, the family dynamic was, well, in order to be taken seriously, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to take this path. You need to fit in. And to be where I am today, where I've been able to create the business of my dreams and be able to do what I love every single day is so cool. And I love to share very openly about this journey because if it at least inspires one woman, just one woman, to start her own path, do you know how many people you will impact? How many lives you will change as a result of that?
Exactly. It's powerful. Like, I think sometimes we see kind of two people in this world, the people that keep this story as a identity that disables them in a way from their potential, And what I
Mm-hmm.
hear in your story is you took that and went, well, I'm different. And so I'm just going to own it and create a life for me that feels really in alignment for who I want to be. And I want to ask you, like, how did you have the courage to actually believe that much in yourself? Like, say, even just like taking that big leap and going to Peru. Like, first, like, obviously the shifting out of psychology, and I totally understand the desire for that. There's definitely limitations that, psychology has as far as how we can support clients. Um,
Yeah.
and so it made sense to me that you would have a very different experience with a coach. And I'm so glad that you had such a positive experience, because I know that there's a lot of different stories there out there too. But how did you shift into having that like spark of this is what I have to do? And you just actually had the like courage to follow through with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny because I look back to my 20-year-old self and I'm like, you were nuts, girl. Like I did some crazy shit. Like I talk about it in my Instagram stories. There was a point where I was like, I was actually at one point selling chocolates, handmade chocolates in the streets of Cusco to pay the place where I was staying. Like I did everything and everything. I was absolutely fearless. And maybe there was like this little tiny sliver of I was like a little bit naive. That's fine. Just
That's okay.
just naive enough to just do crazy
Yeah.
stuff. But to be honest with you, I grew up traveling quite a bit. I'm really lucky my mom was a flight attendant, and
Mm,
so for as young as I can remember, she would take us away for 3 days. We would travel all over the world. So by the time I was like, I don't know, 16, I've traveled to so many places in so many countries. And we also had a lot of au pairs growing up. So my parents would bring au pairs because we were learning French. So we would have au pairs from Europe, um, different countries. So I felt already that like I was raised to be global. My mom was a travel maniac, before my mom was 20, she had traveled to like 40 or 50 countries.
nice.
My mom was probably a little bit crazier than I was in terms of being adventurous. So I think maybe it's like part of my blood. But the
Yeah.
aspect of Peru and making that bold decision, it's the strangest feeling. I can only say that it was like this incessant calling that I kept feeling over and over and over again. And it got louder and louder and louder. And it was just like, okay, I had tried to talk myself out of it because that's a very quote unquote smart thing to talk yourself out of,
Mhm.
to be going to a one way trip to a country where you don't speak the language.
Yeah.
And it literally was just a soul's calling. And the voice got louder and louder. And I thought to myself, okay, what is the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is I get there, I hate it, it sucks. I come back home, nothing
Yeah.
changes, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that something that I've learned to do now, and to any of you listening who, you have a decision to make or you want to do something and there's fear, because the fear's never going to go away, is ask yourself, what is truly on the other side of that? And so I sat with it and I said, okay, what is on the other side of me going to Peru? What could possibly be there? And it's like, well, all these experiences, all these people that I can meet. I've been wanting to
Mhm.
go to Machu Picchu. I've been wanting to go to the Sacred Valley. And so I really connected and just trusted that it will unfold exactly as it's meant to. And as soon as I made that jump and went to Peru and I showed up and I like made a life for myself, I made friends, I got a job, I like the most magical things started happening to me. And because I took that first leap, it was like, what can I not do? And I
Yeah.
think that we, when we take that first big leap, we become so courageous that the next thing is so much easier to do. So, okay, for me to take, a plane to another city in Peru, easy. For me to start this thing, easy. I've already done the hard thing. I've already built up this repertoire of being courageous and making these bold decisions. But it does take that one kind of courageous move to kind of just solidify of, oh my gosh, self-trust. That is what being courageous comes down to, is trusting yourself, trusting that no matter what, you've got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, had I not gone to Peru, I mean, I would not be having this conversation with you today. I'm sure of that. I wouldn't have built the business that I've built. I wouldn't have helped the people I've helped. Soul City would not have existed. And it all happened because Steph at 24, 20, 25, I think, 25-year-old Steph decided to buy a one-way ticket to Peru. And that one single decision, think about it, has changed the trajectory of my life. Imagine I was like, you know what, I'm just going to stay in Canada. I'm just going to keep continuing to work in this office and coach these clients. I don't know where I would be today. I really don't. And I'm happy with where I am today. I love what I do. And so if you just think about it, it's that one decision in hindsight that changed the entire trajectory of your life.
And what would you say to the person that maybe made that, or is like, okay, well, there's twofold questions I have for you. First part, so a lot of what stops people that I've observed is a fear of judgment and a fear of, ironically, success and failure mixed into one. So they stop themselves from doing the bold thing because, you asked yourself the beautiful question, like, what's the worst that can happen? Which ironically feels like a negative question, but it actually can solve a lot of the like nagging thoughts in the back of your brain. And I ask my clients a lot that too, because really when you like are objective with it, it's really not that bad. Like you were like, I could just come back home. But there are some people that genuinely are like, that would be humiliating. If I said to the world, this is what I'm doing, and then I have to like go quote unquote backwards, what would you say to that person that's like knows they need to make that bold move, but they're scared of it already potentially not working out, or what would happen if it didn't work out?
Right. Well, it all comes down to what you said originally was a fear of judgment, which that played a role. There was friends of mine that were like, you're a nut. Like, what are you doing? And I had friends that were like, I'm really worried for you. I'm really worried about this decision. And was I afraid of fear of judgment? 100%. And what I have to say to this person who, if this is you right now, those who judge, truly judge, and, are like, imagine it didn't work out. I'd come back and they're like, well, see, I told you it didn't work out.
Yeah.
My experience is we all know what judgment is. What is judgment? It is projection. It's really what it is. It's projection of one's beliefs about themselves of like, I would never do that. So it's really important to know first what judgment is and where it comes from, because yeah, we're human beings. We have judgments about each other. That's just the world we live in. But if your life is dictated based on what other people may or may not think of you, you are not living life on your own terms. And that's just a fact. You're living life on other people's terms of how they're dictating you should be living your life. And those who are, passing judgment because of a decision you made, I'm willing to bet that they only had the courage and the balls to do what you're doing. And I start to look at the people. This is a really important thing that I'm about to say, but I started to look at the people who had judgments for it. Almost all of these people were people who had never left the country, who had never traveled. They'd never been to South America. They'd never seen the world.
Yeah.
So then what did I start to do? I started to ask people who had traveled to Peru, started to ask people who were on the other side of where I wanted. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, you need to get down here. This place will blow your mind. You'll change your life. I started to talk to people who were, digital nomads traveling the world. And what they shared with me was like, there's a reason I haven't gone back. I'm still doing this 10 years later. Like, it will be the best decision that you make. So when it comes to your life and what you feel is in true alignment with you, and if it's in true alignment with you because you have that voice that keeps getting louder and louder and louder. And the thing is that whether it works out, quote unquote, or doesn't, it is a part of your path. It's is in some way. It always will work out, because no matter what, like, you're destined for something. You're destined for more. But we don't get that if we're living by other people's rules, if we're living by, living life on other people's terms, or how we believe we should live life, right? Based off what other people think of us.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I always come down to is, if you're thinking of making a courageous, bold move in your life, never, ever ask people who are trapped for advice. Never ask people who have not been to where you're going for advice, because they will not know.
Yeah.
So if you have a decision to make, ask people who are on the other side of that decision what they
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
rather than people who have no idea.
And it's such a good point because I see this happen so much where people will consult, say, their parents or their friends who never, and it's like, consult them about something that that person knows nothing about, like say a coaching
Yeah.
business or going into a new business, and they have no idea, and they're sharing these ideas with people who it's not even a judgment back to them. They've just chosen their path and it's not
Yeah.
in the same path as yours. And so why would you seek wisdom and support and advice from someone that doesn't get it, right? Like this is such a
Mm.
perfect example of why you hire the coach who you admire, why you work with this
Yes.
person that's on a similar path to you, because they'll also provide you with examples of what's possible rather than shower you with doubts and keep you limited to what's possible. And that's
Totally.
part of a lot of the journey that I'm sure you do with your clients too, of just helping them decondition some of those pieces that we grew up with and that our parents kind of tell us what we should be like, as you said, like
Mhm.
fit the mold. But do you think some of your adversities with ADHD growing up also kind of give you, like, I almost feel like this inner resilience of like, well, I'm already being judged for this, so I might as well just do this
100%.
because here we are.
100%. And I've used that to my advantage.
Yeah, I think that's
I've totally used that to my
powerful.
advantage.
Because I think like our squiggly brains are actually really special and superpower.
They're magical brains. I'm
Yeah,
sorry for people who don't have it. No, I'm just
yeah.
kidding. But really, they're magical brains. Most entrepreneurs are neurodivergent in
Yeah,
some sort of way.
yeah. And if we use that as a limiting belief, right? Because again, the
Mhm.
school system is very, you have to fit this mold,
Yeah.
but that doesn't breed entrepreneurs. It doesn't breed thought leaders. That doesn't breed change
No,
makers. Like school is like, you fit this mold. Here you are. Here's your path laid out for you. And you know, this is why I wanted to talk to you because I see this in you where you're like, you don't fit that traditional mold and you're making your own path for yourself. And I think that's super inspiring to witness and see as well. Um,
yeah.
and part two of that original question. So say you have the courage to do the thing, right? Because I'm thinking
Mm.
about some of my clients who I've talked to recently, and they almost hit a self-imposed glass ceiling where their nervous system is like, okay, we did the brave thing and now we're here and it's working. But you have examples of how you continued to push yourself into courageous, bold choices past Peru. So, how do you keep that momentum going and keep your body on board for the continued growth that's required to still expand safely? Like, what would you say to someone who's like,
Mhm.
like I can't go anymore. It's already scary, and I just want to stay comfortable now where I am, or I've hit my benchmark, and now I don't want to continue to grow anymore.
Totally. Well, I have to say is that it all comes down to what do you really want in your life? What do you want to experience? And what version of you, if you want to experience really great things, epic things, what version of you is required to make that happen? And I think that in regards to a business entrepreneurial sense, like
Yeah.
we have to constantly be out of our comfort zone. We have to if we want to see growth in our business. And it's just choosing to be bold and brave over and over and over and over again, even when it's really hard. And my whole thing is that sometimes we get to a place where we're like, okay, I just need to pause because I've been doing a lot of growth. And maybe there's parts that, things that need to be integrated. But nonetheless, I am a really big believer that if you constantly push yourself, even just a little bit, your nervous system will start to regulate itself because you'll also begin to have more self trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, to anyone listening right now, if you're like, I've done some really scary things, I feel good. I feel good. I really believe that there's a part of you that's like, let's just go a little bit further. Let's just see what else we're capable of, you know? And if it comes down to this, we have, let's say, 80, 90, 100 years if we're lucky on this planet. don't you want to know what you're capable of? I mean, I do. I want to like gun it my whole life and just see like, let's just ride this baby. Let's just like ride this entire journey to the max capacity and just see what we're capable of. You know, it's like you've got one opportunity with this version of you to go through life. That's
Yeah.
it. One opportunity in a very like small length of time in the grand scheme of things. And I start to think big picture in my life. And this is what I say to everybody. It's really hard to move past your edge or kind of out of your comfort zone if you are not connected to the bigger vision of your life. And that doesn't mean you have to have a business for that. It doesn't mean, you need to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't have to mean that at all. It just means, what do you want for your life? What is the big picture? What is like dream big vision? Because if you don't have that, it's really hard to move forward, because where are you moving to? Where are you going? So we all have that. I have it too, where I'm like, okay, I feel like I've kind of hit this glass ceiling. I feel like I don't know if I can push myself. And then I'm like, what is the big picture stuff? What
Yeah.
are you here to do? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, I want to impact millions. All right, big picture. So what is the next move? Because we're not at that point yet. We haven't impacted millions. We haven't touched lives of millions, you know? So what is the next thing that you need to do? So if you're listening right now, I really want you to get really clear of like, what is your why? What is your vision for your life? The other part of this question is that sometimes the vision for our life can be really limited, right? Because we can live within the constraints of our limiting belief. Well, that's too much. I'm not going to ask for that. You know, maybe instead of like a house on the beach, I'm just going to ask for this small little apartment that's kind of near the beach. But
Yeah.
are the desires like we want a beach home front? I mean, I at least do, right? Or we want all these things, but we talk ourselves out of it. It's too much. I don't know if that's going to happen. So we start to minimize our own vision. And the more that we do that, of course, it's hard to move. But if
Yeah.
we have a really big vision for our life and you tune into that 5 minutes a day, I guarantee you, your being, the embodiment in which you live, you will start to just make bold decisions because you're so tuned into your why. You're so tuned into your vision. And so, to the person listening, if that's you right now, and you're like, I feel like, I don't know, it's hard for me to grow, it's hard for me to step out of my comfort zone, I already have, then have a vision for your life. And if you do, I can guarantee you it's probably not big enough. Make it bigger, make it scarier, make it more of like, whoa, like that is moving.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes the thing that moves us forward. It becomes, the thing that propels us to move forward, to create that vision in which we have just really allowed ourselves and given ourselves permission to dream.
Yeah. I think there's like the word that kept coming to me as you were talking, and this is not a negative word, but there's like a thirst or a thirstiness to it as you take a sip.
Yeah.
But there's literally a thirst for more. And I think, I want to talk to your thoughts around this concept of like, it's safe to ask for more. It's safe to want
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I work with a lot of women, and sometimes that too much voice can really put a damper on what's possible. And
Yeah.
sometimes that nice girl or the adaptive one, or right, the one that plays it safe her whole life, she is not letting herself even think past what's possible with what she currently has, because there's deep conditioning. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so much conditioning from generations before us around what's possible for women in business, and where women can take their lives. And then there's a ton of conditioning also around what women, quote unquote, should do with their
Yeah.
lives, and when the timing piece, oh my gosh,
Oh
there's
God.
a ton of pressure around there,
Talk about pressure.
like so much pressure. And so I would love to hear your thoughts around even that, just that subject of like, women are hearing this and like, well, who am I? Who do I think I am for asking for more? Like that inner voice comes out sometimes where it's like, I'm selfish, or I'm greedy, or I can't ask for that. Or I mean, there's women that I meet that don't even know what their basic needs are sometimes because
Yeah.
they've been so caretaking others. And
Yeah.
how would you help a woman kind of like see her potential if she's not even allowing herself to dream yet?
Well, first I would kind of start of like, where did the voice of, I can't have this or it's too much, where did that originate from?
Yeah.
Because usually speaking, that voice isn't ours. It's like, oh, that was my mom said that, a lot of my grandmother, or that's a voice that I heard of like, why don't you just ask for this? Why don't you just settle? And sometimes it's also because we've seen somebody in our family dynamic settle.
Yeah.
And there's this sometimes this guilt of, well, I've seen this isn't true for me, but maybe for somebody, they've seen their mom settle time and time and time again. And they feel like there could be this aspect of betrayal of, this is something that can surface too, of like, well, if I start to go after what I really, really want, and my mom didn't have that opportunity, I feel like I'm going to betray her. And
Mm.
it's kind of this subconscious belief of around
Mhm.
betrayal, right? Of like betraying our family members because they had a different reality than we did. So sometimes even in that aspect, we keep ourselves small,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to make my parents feel bad. So sometimes I start to explore of like, okay, where did this voice originate from? And usually we find out, well, it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, this is where I love parts work, IFS, and parts work is really beautiful for this, of like really starting to learn, okay, what does this part need to hear from you? If you were able to like reparent this part of you that believes it's asking for too much and you were able to give it a new part, what part would you give it? Right. And so, I mean, I would do in a session, and sometimes this comes up for clients in business, right? Like we're faced with so many,
Oh, yeah.
gosh, business is crazy, right? We're faced with so many mirrors and reflections of our own limitations that can serve us in business. So what I would have somebody do if they're like, well, I don't really know like what I'm actually capable of because I've been told this lie, because it is a lie of I can't have more, I can't ask for more. But if you could,
Yeah.
what would you want? What would you want for yourself? Well, I don't know because I haven't been able to. If you could,
Mm-hmm.
if imagine this crazy scenario where right in this moment, you could literally make a wish and have anything that you want in life, any life that you wanted to live, created an alternate universe. What life would you be living then? And start to get the person out of their own limited mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And start to like dream big. Okay. Imagine that in a parallel universe, there's, choose me, there's a Stephanie in a parallel universe who, from the minute she was born, told she could do anything she wanted. She was told she was loved. She was told that she could achieve anything that she wanted in life because she had it within her.
Yeah.
There's a version of me in a parallel universe, Stephanie, who has zero limitations.
Mhm.
Zero. She doesn't know no. She doesn't know it. I can't do that. It doesn't exist. She only knows I want this and I can get it done. She has all the tools and resources to create whatever reality it is for herself, anything that she wants. So if I were to design a parallel universe in which that was the way in which I grew up, what life do you think that I would have created for myself with
Mm.
zero limitations? Only being fed, you are incredible. You are going to accomplish so much. You can do anything you want. You have everything within you to create the life that you desire. All the resources in the world. What life would Steph be creating in that parallel universe? What would be her day-to-day life? What would she wake up thinking? What would she be doing day to day? If she's looking out the window, what does she see?
Mm-hmm.
What in her house? What does her house look like? What is her relationship like? Is she in a relationship? Is she married? Does she have kids? What is it? And I love that because it gets us out of dreaming of our conditional mind and gets us dreaming of like, okay, it's not me. It's a parallel universe. It's another version of me. And then we start to feel those aspects of, oh, I don't know, she has like more freedom. She's living this, she's built this empire. She has kids. She has this beautiful home. And it's like, okay, that's your North Star. That's your North Star.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think too, I see this sometimes in, I see this in my parents' generation a lot where again, they weren't really given the opportunity to think that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel even in my family, like I think that way, but I don't see examples of it in my close sphere. And it doesn't mean to say that, my family hasn't considered thinking that way, but there's oftentimes like life circumstances that have happened where it's just not possible. And then so quickly we get in a habit of, well, it's just not possible right now, becomes very quickly, well, life is just happening like to me instead of for me. I'm not a co-creator of my reality. And that also can become like kind of walls caving in on you feeling.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up the feeling of like the betrayal piece because I never really actually thought about it that way before. And I see how that could even just play out in my own personal dynamic of like, I am the one not living where my whole family is. My family has kind of stayed in Manitoba, Canada, and here I am in Vancouver right now, but I've traveled much more than some of my family members and lived different places for a while, and I'm kind of carving my own path. And I think
Mhm.
that's also can be very challenging for some people and isolating, not having like proof of what's possible, because that's, I know what our brain wants. It wants to see it so that it feels safe to take the steps.
Yes.
And I think that it's really challenging, and I just want to acknowledge this to people who are listening too, like it's really challenging to be the black sheep, the cycle breaker,
Yeah.
the one doing it differently, because you don't have tangible, like, well, it worked out for this person, so why not, right? Like the mindset of someone that has been given it all, you really have to condition your mind to regularly allow yourself to be in that state
Yes.
of, anything's possible and allow your imagination to turn into your reality. And that's really ultimately how we create with the universe rather than waiting for it to happen, is intentionally letting your mind go there. And I don't see a lot of people talk about the power of imagination, that and how much it can really change someone's life, especially if they are the mover and shaker. They are the one carving a different path, right? They're not following the mold. And I think entrepreneur life, even in today's society, there's so many cookie cutter approaches out there to like how to get clients, how to build leads, how to do da 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 da. And we all kind of just like marching along, like, okay, have to create the funnel and do the thing and da 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 da. Da. And again, it's another form of like a box that we are putting ourselves in perceived sense of safety. But what if you're the innovator? Like, how
Yes.
to cope with that? And I see you as an innovator, and I see our squiggly, lovely, fancy brains also kind of tend to be alternative thinkers, but again, to not get discouraged by that. I don't know, I
Yes.
just love your thoughts on that. It's not a question, but I just love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that a lot of us we're leaders. We're supposed to be innovators. We're supposed to
Yeah.
do things differently than the norm. And that applies to everything, business, life, etc. And I really believe that something that's really important, and I cannot stress this enough, is that if you're in a place in your life right now where you're looking at your circle, you're looking at your friends, you're looking at your community, you're looking at your parents, and you're like, well, I'm nobody that I know is really living the life that I want to live.
Mm-hmm.
And this really means you got to upgrade your circle. You
Hmm.
got to find people that are doing the thing that you want to do and find people that are an example of it, because it might not be in your family,
Yeah.
right? And how our parents grew up, let me tell you, the times were wildly different than they are now,
Yeah.
And we have to innovate and create a new way of living based off of how we're living now and not be living how our parents thought that they should be living. The society has changed. Things are different.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget when I first started my journey of entrepreneurship, I was really alone. I didn't know anybody that was doing what I was doing. And I felt like alone in the corner of a world doing my thing on the internet and being like, none of my friends were entrepreneurs at the time. I didn't have any friends that were doing this. All of them were working corporate 9 to 5 jobs. Some of them were doing their masters. Some of them were going back to get their PhD, lawyers, doctors, working as business professionals. Like nobody I knew was doing what I was doing. And lucky for me, I have a very strong mind and strong spirit that I kept going. And I've eventually found people. But if I could go back, I probably would have said, find people on the internet, find entrepreneurs right off the bat. And if you're somebody, whether you're thinking of starting a business or you are an entrepreneur and this is you, that's why you join communities, you join masterminds, you surround yourself with people who have a big vision. You know, it's so important that we get ourselves in rooms with people that are visionaries. And if you're not somebody that wants to build a business, but you're somebody that wants to make different choices in your life, find people who are doing that. Find a new community, because it can be really, really hard, because what we can hear is, you've changed. I don't know what you're doing. You know, like, you're different. And
Mhm.
we feel like it's pulling us back, and we feel like we've taken 10 steps backwards,
Yeah.
when all we have to do is kind of shift our surroundings and change our environment. Change your environment, find different friends, find a, you know, a supportive group that is living the life that you want to live, or examples of the life that you want to create for yourself.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us don't have that in our family, you know?
Mhm.
So we do, and we can take radical responsibility to go out and find those people, or create those communities ourselves if you don't have one. You
Yeah.
know, you've done that.
Yeah.
And it's like going to create a community where we bring people together, because we we see a lack of it.
Mhm.
And sometimes if we don't find a community like Soul Study, one of the reasons why I was created, because I was trying to find something similar,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
So I
You
created it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and the thing that I want to acknowledge is the grief that comes with change. I remember
Oh gosh.
when I was in counseling school, our grief counselor taught us, like, change equals loss equals grief. And even if the change is positive, there's always kind of a loss that comes with
Mm,
it,
yeah.
and a grief that has to be acknowledged. And this can be like, I up leveled my life and now I'm living the dream. But like the loss that might come with, like, but I don't work with these types of clients anymore and I miss that person. Or, oh, but I don't live
Mhm.
in that small town where I used to get my favorite coffee, and the routine is there, and it requires us to feel. And I think all of what we're saying logically makes sense, but as a woman, especially, I think a lot of our work is allowing ourselves to feel every step of the
Yes.
way rather than think our way through to the end game. Because if we're not, like, alchemizing and embodying the shifts and changes, our bodies just don't work. It's just like shut
Yes.
down, shut off. Nope, not happening, not safe. And I see this time and time again where it's almost so subconscious until, like, they see it show up in their health, they see it show up um in their energy levels, they see it show up in their romantic relationships.
Mhm.
And it's these small subtle things where she's not listening to what she needs to do because she's scared of the repercussions of that. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, and rightly so, are scared of grief. um Valid to be scared of grief because
Yes.
it's painful. I'm not going to say
Yeah.
it's not. That's the
No.
point. It means you cared about something and now it's shifted and changed, and
Yes.
that's not the end of the world. But again, so many people are scared to let their bodies actually, like, feel through the experience. And in my journey, most of the spiritual awakening shifts that I've had have been hitting that dark night of the soul, hitting that grief, hitting that loss of, like, wow, we were friends for 20 years and you now are not even willing to have a conversation with me about the changes I've made. So I guess we're out of alignment. And, like, the pain of realizing that is so difficult, but also what gives us so much empathy along the way to shift us into those next levels. Because the pain of, also, if I was to go, like, no, 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 come back, like, that would require me to then shrink back down,
Hmm.
limit myself, and not trust that I will continue to attract aligned experiences and people and places and opportunities. And yeah, I'm sure you've experienced the dips in your journey, which
Mhm.
I don't hear a ton of people talk about the dips. So let's just
Yeah,
go there because again, being an entrepreneur, holy shit, there are waves of
a
really
lot of
dark
waves.
times. And sometimes that wave can be like in a span of 10 minutes. Sometimes
Yep.
that wave can be a span of like 10 months of like, what the heck am I doing? Why am I here? This is scary and dark and I can't see out the other side. Have you ever experienced, I mean, obviously you have, but is there any experiences that come to mind that you think of that's valuable to share as far as the dips in entrepreneurship goes and the grief perhaps too and the when you're leveling up because this is also the thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't always feel like you're leveling up when you're in grief, but that's often
Oh
been my
yeah.
experiences. That's exactly when you are.
I mean, when I think back to a lot of the things that I've
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was because I was making changes of friend groups because I was no longer sharing the same interests as they were, you know? And I think part of the grief too that I want to speak to is that it's almost like we lose that old identity of us. It's like we're
Mm,
shedding an old identity that was once attached to that friend, to that thing. And
yeah.
to me, that's sometimes the grief of like, right? I'm saying goodbye to this stuff, this part of my journey. And that kind of, that's the shitty part too, is like saying goodbye to this old identity that was attached to that friend.
Yeah.
And I say this to a lot, especially when, when I work with clients, especially that are entrepreneurs and not just entrepreneurs, but women that are like making some changes in their life.
Hmm.
There is loss with change. You are so right. And I think that's something that's not talked about. We always talk about like, oh, but you get all this new stuff in your life
Yeah.
and all these cool things. And it's like, I've lost like half of my friends. I've lost all of my friends. I have no people. That's not fun. And at the same time, is that I always stay true to if I am making a change that I know is in alignment with the direction that I'm willing to go towards, and somebody doesn't come along, I believe that maybe that was a friendship that just was supposed to serve its time. And
Yeah.
there are other friends that have been with me, since the age of 12, 13, and they're still a part of my life because they love and accept me for who I am, no matter what I decide to do. And you also find out really who your true friends are. Because sometimes we're friends with people that benefited from us being that version of ourselves. But the moment that we decide we want something better, something different, something more aligned, and it no longer serves them, I think we have to take a hard look at that friendship. Is this really supportive?
Hmm.
And I would say that a lot of things that I hear, my experience as well, is that on my journey of entrepreneurship, one thing that kind of surprised me, doesn't anymore, but it did at the beginning, was how many friends were just not supportive at all. You know, didn't care to ask me about Soul City. And this was like a year and a half, 2 years into my business. Didn't care to ask,
Yeah.
wanted nothing to do with it. If I brought up the conversation, it was like, switch subject. And I was like, what the heck is going on here?
Hmm.
What happens when we up level, when we make big changes in our life? We are stepping into our potential. Actually, we're becoming our potential. And it's going to shine a mirror into the faces of those who have not yet done that. Two things will happen. One, it will either inspire people to make the change, to also up level their life, to also choose better, to also want more and pursue it. Or it highlights those people who feel, I think, ashamed that they know that they have the potential, but they choose not to go after it. And so they make you wrong for doing it. They make you seem like the bad guy, or, we're not going to talk about it. I'm not going to acknowledge this part of your life, even though I know it's important because I feel a certain way that I haven't stepped into my potential. So we're shining a light in people who are not doing anything with their potential.
Hmm.
And that can be really triggering.
Yeah. And there's also the person that is like, well, I don't understand what you do, so I can't have a conversation with you, and I don't know how because we're on completely different
Mm-hmm.
paths. But like some of my biggest supporters have been my friends who are full-time moms. Like,
Wow.
why are we assuming that you have to do the exact same thing in life to be able to support
Totally.
one another? This is the other thing. It's like, acknowledge what you don't know, because then you can have a curious and engaging conversation about it, rather than no one's expecting you to be an expert and offer advice if you're asking your friend how their business is doing. Like, guaranteed she's not wanting a coaching session when you go for brunch. So why don't you just actually ask her how she's feeling in her business and how they can support you? And, it's funny, I posted this thing on my Instagram recently. I saw another woman talk to this and I elaborated on it, but she had said some of her biggest supporters in business have been strangers on the internet. And it's like she can't even get her actual family and friends to like comment on things or repost things. And she's putting herself out there all the time, but it's
Mhm.
strangers that are supporting her more than the real people in real time in real life. And that circles back to that loneliness of the entrepreneur world and having your own business and being in a, one-on-one experience, which is why the value of community, but even facilitating and leading the community can feel oddly isolating because you're the leader of it rather
Yes.
than the participant of it. And it's this fascinating sort of like I don't know what the stuck or the block is there, other than like maybe a fear of inadequacy or a fear of like, well, I have nothing to contribute to this conversation, so I don't even want to go there.
Right.
Um, but I'm also curious, and this is just is coming up in my brain right now, is I see a pattern and like women really focus a lot on what isn't working well and their
Yes.
relationships and centralize men as a big component of the conversation all the time. And one of the big things that I was working on manifesting, and I feel like I've done a good job of that, was bringing women into my world who are also entrepreneurs, who want to talk about spirituality and growth and change and do those growth oriented things and talk about how we can support and uplift each other rather than complain about what isn't working all the time. Bond
Yes.
over our trauma. Oh, go and date the same type of men over and over and over again and then just vent about them at brunch. It's just like, why do we do this? Like, why is this such a habit of just how women bond?
Yeah.
The complaining, the men centric, you know, the inadequacy piece, focusing on what isn't working as opposed to focusing on what is.
Yeah. And I think too that I don't remember where I read this. Maybe you would know, but it was a book that talked about, maybe it was Sapiens. I can't remember, but it was a book that talked about how humans' brains were naturally more negatively biased than positively biased.
Yeah.
And like that's also like kept us alive,
Mhm.
so we're always like looking out for looking out for threats.
Yeah.
And our brain has been kind of wired in that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know who said this fact, but there was an entrepreneur, can't remember who it was, but they said the number one success factor for an entrepreneur is they are an opportunist and have a very positive mindset.
Mm.
And I'm like, that is really important because honestly, that is something that I've had to work really, really hard at. I'm really hard on myself. I'm not somebody that would go into a conversation and focus on all the negative things per se, but I'm like, what can I do to do better? What can I do to do better? Rather than focus on like what is working. And that's a huge thing with us entrepreneurs is that if we focus on what's working in our business and just amplify that a heck of a lot more, things will be working even better. If you focus on what's working in your relationship, in your romantic relationship, that would amplify even more. If you were to look at what's working in your life, in your relationships, and in your friendships, what you focus on ultimately grows, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really believe that when you are somebody that you're trying to shift your mindset, you're trying to start to look at like what is working and how do I focus on it, what you'll start to notice is you'll get really clear on who's operating in what's not working. And really, I mean more of that, I hate to say it, but that like victimization
Yeah.
talk,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. That is what it is. But I am saying that when you're somebody that takes radical responsibility, when you're somebody that wants change and you pursue it and you do it and you celebrate yourself, you appreciate yourself, you love yourself, you focus on what's working in your life, you will start to see where others are not doing that. You'll start to see the complete opposite side of the pendulum, and you'll start to notice those conversations way more because you were once involved with them. It was a normal thing. And
Yeah.
we start to like see of like, wow, I didn't really realize that every time I went for brunch with these individuals, it's always like talking about other people. It's always like harping on things that are not working. And sometimes we don't even realize that until we're making this like this change in our life to be different in a
Mm-hmm.
way that best serves us. And so that's where we come back to, can you find people that think the same way you do? Can you find safe, incredible, beautiful communities where it's just women lifting each other up, not focusing on my ex did this or this happened to me or this client did this, it's like, okay, can we focus on the path forward? Because the more we focus on that, we feel stuck and stagnant and we're just kind of more trapped in the past, right?
And that's very like also making meaning bigger than it needs to be sometimes too.
Yes.
And I was just talking about this with a girlfriend actually, that I see this observation that there are like two types of people in the world. There's the person that genuinely goes out and goes like, I believe the best in people. Most people are just out there trying to do their best. And I tend to look at the world as like everything is going to be okay. And even if someone hurts my feelings, I know they probably didn't mean it. And then
Mhm.
there's the other type of person that's like, everyone's out to get me, and I have to protect
Yes.
myself. And I have to make sure that I'm hyper vigilantly aware of all the things that they're going to do to harm me so that it doesn't hurt. And oftentimes these two very much mirror each other because person one can have zero boundaries and a big giant heart and be super empathic and attract in experiences where people take advantage of them, and
Yeah.
person two can be the opposite, a closed heart, and not see, well, people actually are here to help you, people are here to support you. And I find that that dynamic is so interesting, how oftentimes I see it actually they become in a relationship. One is a bit more like that than the other. And I think it's a reminder too of like, how does someone see the world? And do they see the world similarly to you? Are they someone that
Uh,
you can have a challenging conversation with and then come out the other side being like, oh, you triggered me, and it's my responsibility to look at my trigger instead of it's your fault, you change, right? Those are two very different conversations. And I've had experiences of both of those happening, and the most healing thing and the way we build trust, ironically, is through having those challenging conversations where you trigger your friend or your partner or your colleague, and then they go, and let's work through it and come to a resolution or a conclusion or a clarity, rather than you're the problem, you need to change, it's your fault for causing this da 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 thing to happen in the first place. Right. And that's sometimes where we so tiptoe and avoid because we're scared that like conflict means something isn't working. But
yes.
oftentimes that is the branching point to build trust and actually
Yes.
build vulnerability, and knowing how to repair is something that I see so many people just completely unaware of how to do it because obviously parents sweep things under the rug. You were probably sent to your room when you did something wrong, and then you're like,
Yeah.
"Can I come out now? I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
allowed."
totally.
And everything's okay again, or the opposite, where it's like something horrible happened, and you're like, I have to avoid. I have to be good all the time so that I don't get punished. And it's so is a pattern in business and in relationships because again, if you are a person who is leading your business or your life, getting comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations even with your clients or with people that like don't pay on time, or people that
Hmm.
say they're going to do the thing and then don't follow through with it. What would you say to those people that are like kind of more conflict adverse and wanting to get more comfortable building connection through building repair? in business and in life, really, because you have experience obviously with both.
Yeah, massively. I really believe that the more that we try to avoid conflict, the more that we live in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Think about
Yeah.
that for a second. If you have a lot of conflict in your life that you're avoiding, you're constantly in a state of conflict. That is not a fun place to be.
Yeah.
I used to, I would say in the initial stages of my business, I kind of used to like avoid conflict a little bit. I used to avoid challenges. And I've learned that when you face conflict, first of all, I always think of it as like this. There's you, there's the individual, and there's a conflict. The conflict is separate from both parties, and you
Yes.
have to view it like that. The conflict is not the other person. It's a third party, right? Let's just remove it from, oh, it's this person's fault. They did this and this. No, the conflict is separate. We begin to
Mm-hmm.
neutralize the conflict right away. I truly believe, think of the most phenomenal leaders in the world, leaders that we look up to, that we aspire. They are there because they move through conflict. They are there because they learn the power of repair. They are there because they face the challenges, the problems of conflict head on. And there are leaders that are great leaders in the world. There are leaders that are not great leaders at all. So I am only speaking about the leaders who are heart-centered in integrity.
Yeah.
They've had to have very hard conversations in their life. We will all have hard conversations in our life, many, weekly, monthly, hourly, daily, who knows? But the whole point is anytime that there's a conflict, I am really the type of person that I want to address it right away. And I want to be a person of integrity that's really heart-centered. And I really want to understand, what is the core need here? And it's understanding what the core need is. A really great book that I love is Nonviolent Communication. That's like one of the best books ever to read if you're not somebody who's great with addressing conflict, or addressing problems. It's the best book to read that really addresses of having what I call a need-based conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're running a business, you're going to have conflict with your team. You're going to have conflict with clients. Maybe some are not happy. Maybe something happens. Or maybe you start, working with somebody one-on-one, and like you realize that it's not a fit anymore. You're like, this isn't working. And it's really being a responsible individual. And we can't make it mean anything about us, and vice versa. And it's really looking at, what is the core need here that's not being met for myself or the individual, and asking the person in the conversation of like, what is it that you need from me, to feel XYZ, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel accepted. And it's really having this neutral conversation of being a responsible individual, and knowing that like you are responsible to repair conflict, because if you don't, you live in conflict all the time. And not only that, but I want you to think about what happens when we avoid conflict. The number one thing that comes to mind is, I'm giving my power away. That's what it feels like to
Mm-hmm.
me. I'm giving my power away to this conflict, to this situation, to this conversation, to this thing that happened.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? We don't want to give our power away to a conflict or something. We want to have our power within us and recognize that, because it always is within you, and honor that. Okay, this thing is bothering me. I want to have a conversation with this individual. Now, the other part is, sometimes you'll find that the individual where there's a conflict maybe doesn't want to have a conversation with you. And maybe they're really triggered or pissed. And we've all had this of like, it is just not happening. This person is not having it. They are extremely dysregulated. They're extremely triggered. And we have to make sure that we're doing our best to like disarm any type of trigger and just come out of this place with neutrality and love. And also know, not everybody's going to respond
Yeah.
amazingly or nicely to conflict. Not everybody's going to, and that's just the way that it is. But in my opinion, to be a phenomenal leader, you are going to go through challenges. You are going to get thrown so many curveballs. You're going to get literally punched in the face by so many things. And you've got to be able to be the woman that is in integrity, that takes the high road, that does the good thing, that honors her journey, that faces the challenge and the conflict, that addresses it head on and in a loving manner. And
Mm-hmm.
also knowing that we can't change how another person is going to act or not going to act.
Yeah.
What we can do is come to the table to have a beautiful, loving, open, honest conversation, explain what it is that we need, ask them what they need. And maybe that means that relationship parts ways. Maybe that's the end of a friendship. Maybe that's the end of a business partnership. But nonetheless, that's the road to you living in alignment. That's the road to you being a sovereign being, is being open and honest and transparent. And conflict, in my opinion, and challenges is the greatest expander.
Mm-hmm.
You become way more confident. You trust yourself. You become more convicted into who you are and your work in this world. Because if you can handle that, baby, there's going to be more conflicts coming your way. Don't you worry. Life's like, cool.
Oh, yeah.
Let's throw another one. We've got like a lineup of 50 more conflicts this month that this chick has no idea. She did one. All right, let's throw another one. That's how life is. There'll be another one.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if we reframed conflict? And I do this. When I have a challenge, I now look at it as like, oh my gosh, bring it on. There's a lot of opportunity for me here. This is how I grow. This is my school. This is my playground for me to find out, how can I deal with this challenge today? What are some really cool, unique solutions to this that I haven't thought about? And it's like, can you have, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but like fun in looking at the opportunity of the conflict, of the challenge, of the problem, because there's growth and expansion available for you there, right?
Yeah. Big time. Big time.
A lot of it.
I'm a big advocate for the circle back, because we don't always have our words in the moment.
Yes.
And absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, if it takes you time to get clear on how you feel about something happening because there is a trigger there, normal. Because again, everyone's
You're
nervous.
human. Congrats.
Yeah,
Just confirm that.
exactly. Like, I do this work and I don't have all the eloquent words all the time to know exactly how to say and communicate my needs and feelings. So this is why I really encourage so many of my clients to really not be afraid to circle back. So many of my clients, and myself formerly, was very much like this, and I noticed my natural tendency to go to intellectualize, to make sense of the situation, and then I don't bring it back up because I've already dealt with it in my own mind. And then there's no opportunity for that person to offer me their perspective, their feelings, or for even them to like shift and go like, you completely made a story up about a situation that I was not that way at all. But in your mind, and I see so many of my highly independent, strong-willed women going like, well, I'm just going to think about it by myself and not ask for perspective and then figure out all on my own. And then I don't have to actually talk to the person that I'm upset with. So everything's all fine. But then what happens is like, it's not fine, because when something triggers you and you don't have the capacity to pause in that moment because you're like, ooh, it's been buried for too long and now it's like up here and I can't actually like avoid it anymore. It comes out in like a, you did da 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 da, all
Oh yeah,
the
totally.
spill
Like
out.
ammunition style, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's how long has that been in there for?
Exactly. Or the other thing that happens, and I've caught myself doing this too, this silent resentment that can build. And you're just like slowly starting to like not respect your partner or not admire that person the same way. And you're like slowly, it's just like this slow death of a connection where it could have been solved if you just talk to the person that you're having the feelings about and the thing about, and it can instantly resolve it. But I think this is also where the power of coaching support comes in, to be the middleman sometimes for gaining clarity and having the courage to shift the pattern, right? Like, I know I needed that support big time to like shift out of my patterns of figuring out by myself in my room and then crying and then going, I'm fine now because I cried and it's not there anymore. And it's like, Rachele, it was definitely not fine and you did not communicate your needs. And so the pattern kept repeating until you broke the pattern of avoidance of talking about the uncomfortable thing by circling back. And it's honestly sometimes still challenging where it's like, excuse me, I need to share how I feel about something that happened 3 days ago, and I'm just gonna start, and it might not be perfectly eloquent, but here we are.
And that's so brave to do. And I think And I think a lot of us who are like hyper independent individuals, we learn to process things on our own, right?
Mhm.
And how when the conflict involves another individual of sure, you can ask the individual of like, I will come back to this when I'm more regulated or when we know what we want to say because we need time to process it. But we absolutely, I think, do need to have a clarifying repair conversation. And there's so much room for us to learn in those repair conversations of, okay, this is what not to say to somebody because that seems to trigger people, or like this is a really beautiful way of to start up a conversation, and how that's how we learn and that's how we evolve as human beings is to have these conversations, not to process things on our own. Like we're not going to get very far if we think like that. We
No.
just
And I think it's a matter of the difference between communicating head to head or heart to heart. And
yes,
and I think the only way, like, and you said something so important where like, and I'll just elaborate on it, we're not meant to process alone, meaning we're not meant to be an island. You're not meant to actually operate in life completely isolated and by yourself. And unfortunately, the way that the world has evolved recently is you can be in a 20-story apartment building and not even know the neighbor across the street's name or
oh
across the hall's name. And I think this is why we craved community, why you've created community for yourself so well, because there was community in every aspect of your journey that you shared. And I think that's so important. And I especially think women need to reestablish safety with each other as well, to know that, we're here to support one another, not to compete with one another. We're here to uplift each other, not talk behind each other's back. We're here to, you know, genuinely care about the success of our friends. And immediately, like, I think that's also why you and I vibe, because I'm like, I'm generous with my support because it's not a competition here. Like,
yes.
I feel that from you. I felt that from you from day one, where there's just a different frequency of, you know, uh, an individual centric community versus a community centric community.
Mm.
And I've been a part of both and I felt the contract of both, or the contrast of both. And I would love for you to speak on, like, how do you create a community that doesn't feel like it's a Stephanie show?
Mm.
More about all the people in the container, because I think there's a different frequency there. Where it's like, where is the attention going and how do we uplift the individuals within the community container? How do we create a safe space for everyone to feel like they're allowed, quote unquote, allowed to connect with each other, right? Like, I've seen you post like, I have two clients that like are each other's clients now, and it's like, yay, like, great, like that's the win, not like, how dare they not need me anymore, or whatever the thing
Yeah.
is, right? And how do you create that sense of generosity within your community?
I think one of the things that comes from is like healing the relationship with the divine feminine.
Yeah.
Because if we have that sister wound at all, that's
Mhm.
going to come up for your business. You're not going to want to
Mhm.
collaborate. You're going to see everyone else as a competition.
Yeah.
And I think it's knowing also like you're unique, you're different, and we're not the same. I'm not the same as you. You're not the same as me. We are so deeply unique and we have to be.
Yeah.
Imagine we were all the same. We're not going to impact the people that we're here to impact. We have to be different.
Mhm.
We have to be unique and we have to help each other collaborate because let's just say this. If we are truly here to change the world, we're truly here to like impact people, to bring about changes of consciousness, to change the trajectory of our planet and humanity, we have to work together. And this whole mindset, you think about this true, I see this a lot is like this scarcity mindset of like,
Mhm.
what's mine is mine. That's your, this is mine. This is my business. This is my community. I'm not collaborating with you.
Yeah.
And we get really protective. But that protective energy to me comes from somebody who's living in scarcity. They're afraid. They're afraid of losing clients. They're afraid of losing something. They're afraid of something being taken away. And that can be a combination of living in scarcity. That can be a combination of like, yeah, like having a sister wound, not having a beautiful relationship with the divine feminine.
Mhm.
And I think that I've also been a part of communities where it was really focused on the individual who's running the community, and it felt like that individual's show. And it didn't, that's not a community, first of
No,
all.
no.
That's a monologue, that's you on the stage and everyone's just there with their popcorn watching. I'm sorry, like
Yeah.
that's not a community. And a lot of people create communities and membership, but I have to say not everybody actually knows what that means.
Yeah.
And to create a community means that you're creating it for the people. You're not creating it for yourself. You have to listen to the needs of your community. You have to understand what they want, and you have to serve them above and beyond. And not out of your best interest, out of their best interest for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, something that I've been really from the get-go of my business is to like, how do I support women? How do I help them collaborate with each other? So yeah, some of the women in Soul Study coach each other. Some of them offer their services to each other because I want that.
Yeah.
Why would I want to take away, totally, why would I want to take away somebody's breakthrough or somebody's healing journey?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not God.
Yeah.
So who am I to say that you can't work with that person? It's a conflict of interest. No, this is their choice. They're sovereign beings. They can make sovereign decisions. They can choose who they want to work with, you know? And so I think that coming down to it, I mean, you and I are both in the coaching industry, and you and I also both know that there are people who operate out of this competitiveness.
Yeah.
You know, and that people are there to compete with each other. And that's not the reality that I live in. That's not the reality that you and I are here to co-create in the coaching industry. We're here to support women. We're here to help each other rise together, because if we're women who are truly here to create impact, we know that that's best created when we work together.
Exactly.
It's not a competition. What competition to win at life? There's no such thing.
Oh,
What is
yeah.
a competition? Like what? I'm just confused. There's no competition.
No, I think about like if you go into a bookstore and you go into the self-help section, like how many versions of the same book are written, and
Mm,
you know, collective consciousness, like we're all evolving collectively. And I think the beauty and my takeaway from what you shared there was like there's still a sense of individuality, sovereignty, as in like I am in charge of my life and my choices within a container. And there's
yes.
still like openness and expansion that can happen when we are doing something together as a group, and also individually, and also again collectively. Like there's so many components of that, and no one has the exact magic that everyone needs. So you
Yes.
can say the same thing that like self-care, yay, self-care. Everyone says self-care because it's legitimate. It actually does really support you. But everyone has their take on it, and everyone resonates with someone's energy more than others. I mean, that's why I love human design for that component too, is you can really understand resonance on a tangible way. And so I think there's a big component too of like there's a difference in a frequency of a community where the facilitator is a leader of their life. And so it's again not coming from a place of, like you said, scarcity, but coming from a place of generosity. And it's
Yes.
coming from a place of when my community thrives vicariously, I do too, because
Yes.
I love seeing wins within my communities. I love connecting other people with other people and helping them thrive as well. It's something that lights me up, and I don't need a cut of that. It doesn't matter to it, my cut is the
Totally.
joy that I see when other
Totally.
people are on path. And that's
Yes.
all that's in it for me. And so again, just to kind of wrap things up here in our conversation, I think it's really comes down to, is your heart in it? Are you in alignment with it? Are you living in integrity and responsibility in your life? And if you are trusting yourself in all those areas, then
Mhm.
there is no competition. There is really going to be still fears as you up level, as you said, but you're going to trust yourself to take those next steps. And it gets easier and easier the more and more you take those steps. And
Yeah.
we can do that on an individualistic basis, But it's so much better when we have a community of support behind us going, you've got this, you can do it. And this is why you have the one-on-one support, and this is why you have the group support, because
Yeah.
both are integral for someone who is constantly leveling up their life and
Yes.
constantly wanting to lead their life. Is we realize, not an island, I can't offer myself another perspective, so I need I value what other people have to share and say, who are either ahead of me at 2 or 3 steps or on the journey with me, right? There's a
Yes.
value. The coach is ahead of you a few steps, and the community is, we're doing this together. And both are so
Yeah.
vital to change and
You
growth.
100%. You need both. I have both. I have a
Yeah.
work with somebody one-on-one. I have
Yeah.
multiple communities I belong to. And it's like, I need that. And not just me. I really believe. And if you're listening to this right now and you don't have that support, or you have one of those aspects of support, I really encourage you to either work one-on-one with somebody and work in a group, in a community. Like, it's integral to healing different aspects of ourselves. And I really believe that there's that quote that we hear: wounding doesn't happen alone, and neither does the healing, right? And like, the healing journey also happens in community, and it also happens when you work one-on-one with somebody who has your back. They have an objective perspective. They're steps ahead of you. They're there to hold you accountable. They're there to like see you and really call you into your power. Like, there's nothing more precious than that. And then to have a community where you feel this sense of belonging, where you have women or individuals cheering for you, celebrating your wins as if they were their own, and like, really like a reflection of who you are and who you're stepping into, is the most amazing feeling. And I really believe that us as women, I mean, if you know, by through history, women have gathered for centuries. It's in our DNA.
Mhm.
And the world has changed. Yes, we are more online, but that doesn't mean we can't find online communities. Our people are out there, right? And it makes the journey so much easier, whatever changes that you're wanting to make in your life, when you find a community that is reflective of the changes that you're trying to make, that holds you to a higher standard. The conversations are different, the frequency is different. And it's like, it's the most amazing thing ever, because you feel like, I really, really belong here. I feel safe to be. And from a nervous system perspective here, how amazing it to be in a community where you're stepping into change. And maybe that's a big up leveling, but then you're also surrounded by so many women who've also done it or who are on the journey. You're literally regulating your nervous system with these individuals who are making big changes, and the changes feel safer, better, easier,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah. And I love that you circled it back to the nervous system, because there are multiple ways that we can co-regulate as we up level. And that co-regulation is being not an island. You're not doing by yourself, but you have other people, like you said, along the way to really like help you feel through the journey of leveling up. And
Yeah,
ultimately also, have the support in the dips, have the tools to support you in the ebbs and flows of life as an entrepreneur, life in general. And also to know that maybe you're not alone in a lot of your journey, and you're still special and unique and nuanced. And also you're not, you're not alone,
totally.
because everyone else
Totally.
has pain
There's
points.
like 5 other women being like, yeah, girl, I went through that last month. And you're like, I thought I was
Uh-huh.
the only one. No,
Yeah,
girl, I got you. That was me last month. That was
exactly.
so-and-so the year before. No
Exactly.
alone, right?
Exactly. And I think that that's the one of the most important pieces, is just seeing that like other women have done it too. Um,
Yeah,
which is again like circles us back to like just finding your people who are again going with you on the journey, or going or are where you want to be in your, like you said, like the big vision version of self, right? And then have that as your benchmark of proof, even if it's just online, or even if
yeah,
it's just on a book, or even if it's just a movie that you watch on a regular basis. Like, have that as your benchmark, so that you let your brain really allow that to become the reality, so that when the reality is presented to you, it's not terrifyingly scary because you've already sort of introduced it as a
Totally.
possibility in your sphere. And you also like so that you can recognize when it's there and the opportunities are happening.
100%. And it's almost like you've primed yourself, your being, your
Yeah.
energy, your state to like, that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Yep.
It's the same in a relationship, right? Like if you've never been in a healthy relationship before and everyone around you that you know of currently is like, was not the relationship that I want, go and find a relationship that you want. Go and find examples of that. Use that as your North Star. Use that as your guiding light, because the more that you focus on that, the more that you're going to like naturally and intuitively start making decisions to have that happen for you because you have an
Exactly.
example,
Yeah.
right? Whatever that is in life, could be relationships, your business, your friend circle, like external changes that you want to see. Find examples of people who are living out those changes.
Yes. Well, you are one of those people to me, which
As
is
are you, hence why we're having this conversation.
so I'm genuinely truly honored that you are here and talking to me, and I really am so glad I got to pick your brain. And I just want to end with a final question for you. And this is completely trust whatever comes up intuitively for you. But my question is, what is one truth from your heart that you feel the world needs to hear right now?
Oh,
Doozy.
excuse me for not preparing for this question.
That's the point.
I know. Okay. What is one truth that I feel like the world needs to hear right now?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the one truth that I want for anyone to hear is that this goes back to what we were saying earlier about fear and resistance. A lot of us don't move in life because of fear, because of resistance, and because of uncertainty. But I truly know that anything worth living, anything worth having is always on the other side of fear and resistance and uncertainty. And I think it's about remembering the courageous being that you are and to not make fear or resistance or uncertainty the loudest voice in the room.
Mm.
And sometimes when you make fear or resistance or uncertainty the target rather than an obstacle you try to avoid, you end up moving through it because you're like, you know what? Fear is going to be here. Let's just make fear the target. I'm going to be scared. I'm going to do it scared.
Yeah.
And you yourself embody the courageous being that you are. You connect to what's on the other side of fear and you go for what you truly want. And to not be afraid. The other part that I will say is to not be afraid to stand in your truth, to speak your truth, to stand in who you are, what you're here to do, what is truth to you, and to pursue that. You know, we only get one life, unfortunately, in this body, in this entity, on this planet. And I think a lot of things that stop us are fear of it not working out, fear of this person saying something, fear of me being excluded from this community, fear of X, Y, and Z. And we live our life, you know, trying to avoid fear. And what ends up happening is that we live a disappointing life because we're trying to avoid fear or disappointing ourselves or other people. And we're not living a life in truth. That's not what we're here for. And I really believe that God is your guiding light. God gave you a world of abundance. God gave you a world of free will, of choices, of anything that you want, you can have. And you can find examples of that in today's day and age. And it's to remind yourself of, like we said before, what is it that you really want? And if you think that you want something, I ask you to dream even bigger, that you can have it all, not just the breadcrumbs, but the whole
Mm-hmm.
cake, the whole bakery, the whole shebang, all of it. And to remind yourself that you are a child of God. You are one of 8 billion people. You are that special. You are that unique. And to really go after what it is that you want in life and be relentless in your pursuit of it. Because on the journey, you become, it's not even the thing that you get. I know this to be true about entrepreneurship. It's not about the milestone that you hit or the thing that you get. It's who you become along the way. And you
Yeah.
become this version of you that is just fearless, that is in integrity, that is sovereign, that just goes after what she wants because she believes in herself. And I think that to me is the greatest gift to give yourself, is to know what you're truly capable of and to become your fullest potential, because you're going after the big, scary things in life that are worth going for and the version of yourself that you get to become along the way. And nobody can take that away from you. Nobody. Even if I'll use myself. My business crumbles, something fails, something doesn't work out. The version of me will never go away. I have that with me for life. So the
Mhm.
version of you that you get to become on the path to following what you really desire, you've got that version of you for life. And it's the coolest thing of like, nobody can take this away from me. Nobody can take away my thoughts, my being, my spirit, my energy, my unwavering conviction, my confidence. Nobody can take that away from me. And what a gift to give yourself to become that version of yourself, because you can be, right?
Love
So
it.
that's what I
A lot of empowering things to say at the end, which I feel like I also want to remind people to listen to that last chunk of this podcast episode
Mhm.
probably on a daily basis if you need a reminder of remembering who you are. You are divine, you are capable beyond measure, and
Yes.
anything is possible. You got to do it with fear because fear will be
Yep.
there either way. And once you get on the other side of that, it gets easier and easier, right? We go back to, again, once you regulate your nervous system, because you've challenged yourself to see what's possible, going through that with the fear and doing it anyways, it becomes less scary, and fear can really shift into anticipation. It can shift into
Yes.
excitement. It can shift into
Yes.
like so many, it can shift into passion, right? Like the same feeling that we are scared when we're standing in the lineup for the roller coaster at the theme park, but then you're like scared on your tick 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 up the roller coaster and you hit that top and you're like, what? Holy shit, what am I doing? And then you go down and you're like, this is amazing. And you come off that ride and you're
Totally.
like, I'm gonna do it again.
Totally.
Most of
That's
the
such a
time
good
that's the case.
analogy.
It's like, I'm gonna do it again. Because again, that it's such a rush when you realize like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like pushing through that is such a weirdly, I was gonna say turn on. It's like a like
Yeah,
liberating, like, woo,
it
I
is.
can do this feeling. And that I think is such the life of a female entrepreneur, especially of just really noticing how it feels in the body to take yourself to those next levels and
Totally.
trusting yourself and advocating for yourself and your voice and your truth and your authenticity along the way.
Totally. I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, thank you again, Stephanie, for being my very first guest. And I look forward to potentially having continued conversations here
Part two for
because
sure. There'll
we
be a part two.
definitely
There's
have
part
so
two, part
much
three,
we
part
could
four.
elaborate. Yeah, so much we could elaborate on for sure. And at the same time, I don't want a 4-hour podcast episode. So here we are. We're gonna break
But
these up.
it's good
But
to give people a taste of like the magic that's to come, and like
exactly.
amazing for you to start this podcast. And I'm just, yeah, like I can't wait to hear like all your other episodes. And I just love what you're doing. And I think, to all of your listeners, like give this woman some love because she's inspiring, she's courageous, and what you stand for and who you are is just, it's a gift. It's a gift to know you. It's a gift to be able to do this with you. And like I'm so proud of you. I
Oh.
know you're proud of yourself. And to all your listeners, as you're listening to this podcast of, if you can do it, I can do it, you can too. Anyone can. And it's
Yeah.
just really stepping into like your purpose and what you're here to do, and go for it. And we're all in this together. And how inspiring it is to have you as a leader leading the way for so many other women.
Oh,
So
thank
kudos to you and the work that you're doing.
thank you for
I'm
seeing
honored to
me
be part
and
of it.
thank you for being on this journey again. And I so appreciate and love you. And we're gonna sign off.